everybody. Welcome to another Liminal Spaces video. So today we're going to talk about the Star Trek episode 6 of Strange New Worlds, Season 1. And we're going to talk about the Ursula K Le Guin story that might have influenced this episode. And we're going to talk about whether it did influence what we believe. Yeah, if we believe that it really did or not. But first, we're going to start with the episode itself. So, this episode is entitled Lift Us Up Where Suffering Cannot Reach Us, I believe is the title. And I'm not going to go over all the plot points, of course. I'm just going to talk about the things that kind of stuck out to me. First off, there's this fun B-plot. This is the episode where they torture a child to keep their city afloat. This child has to be sacrificed in order to keep the city afloat, literally. If the child is not sacrificed, the city will fall and everyone will die. And there's a B story where Uhura is being trained by the head of security. And she's kind of being put through the paces because our head of security is such a hard ass that she's really pushing Uhura in ways that Uhura's not used to. That's kind of the B story.
Why is she being trained by her?
It's just a Starfleet thing.
They all have to?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Everyone. And it's kind of a fun running joke because everybody knows what Uhura's going through and they keep warning her about things that are coming.
It feels a little like hazing.
I guess so.
Because they keep kind of scaring her.
Right. They are joking with her. Yeah. Because they've all been through it. They all know. And everybody understands the importance of doing that. She's not going to be a security person. But, of course, knowing what security does helps her. So, there's this cute little B story, but this really weird thing happens where they get into a conflict, and there's this ship that is firing on the Enterprise. And because Uhura is in training, she is manning the weapons. And Pike gives her the order, take out their weapons, but don't hurt the shuttle. And she tries, but she messes it up. And she destroys the shuttle, basically. Like, she kills people. And she's like, I'm sorry, they moved and it got weird. And they're like, it's okay. And the shuttle, like, disintegrates into the atmosphere.
Right.
Like, it's crazy.
It was.
You know? And I'm like, do they try to beam them out? And they don't do anything. They don't care. And granted, that ship did fire on them and they couldn't hail them. But I found it really bizarre that they didn't check for life forms and beam them into the brig. It would have been totally simple to save those people.
It also seemed really convenient to me that the people that were firing on the Enterprise never just opened communications and explained themselves.
Right.
They constantly just ignored, and they had to do that for story purposes.
Right, because they would give everything away like that.
Right. Yeah. But that seemed a little interesting that they're like, we're not going to tell our side, and just completely keep radio silence.
Yeah. So that was a really weird thing.
It was a strange moment.
Happened, and it never comes up again. Nobody cares. That was bizarre. There's another scene where we meet the people that were in the other shuttle.
Yeah, this is the A story now.
Yes.
Yeah. This is the
now
main
we're
story.
on to the main story. The people that were in the shuttle that was being attacked, they do get beamed aboard before their ship explodes. And Pike and the rest of the leadership meet with the people on the shuttle to find out why they were being attacked. Why did they have to ask for help? And in that conversation, it is very, very obvious that the person they're talking to is the bad guy, basically.
Allura.
That's her name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I thought was a little on the nose, that she had Allure and her and Pike, had an old relationship.
Yeah, and there is definitely a Kirk thing going through this. Yes,
yeah.
from the old stuff. Yeah, but it's just weird that it's pretty dang obvious that the minute they start talking that, okay, you're the bad guy. We all know that that's going to come out, and I don't need these shows to be like mind blowing. Like, I had no idea. You know what I mean?
But it's weird how obvious it was. It was obvious, and I can't even point. And I know you're more, you know more about acting and script writing and stuff. But I can't even point out what it was that they did. Was it her acting style?
No.
Was it the writing?
Yes, okay. She wouldn't answer their questions.
It was super odd.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like right away. I was commenting, "Oh man, she's the bad guy."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really obvious, which is kind of too bad. So another interesting part is they find a traitor in their midst, and they're going. They don't literally find them, but they know there's a traitor. And they're going to go figure out who the traitor is. And there's a neat moment, which is basically from a Western, where Pike says something like, "Are you ready to..." I can't remember what word he used, but it doesn't matter. "Are you ready to go find out who the traitor is?" And she's like, "I am ready." And they zoom down onto Pike's gun, and he unsnaps his holster, which I thought was really cool.
It's like the equivalent of cocking his gun to get it ready.
Yeah, or at least unsnapping it so that he had quick access to it.
Because it makes that kind of high-pitched noise.
Yeah, and that's the thing I wanted to point out was it's kind of strange that he did the action of, I want to be able to get my gun easily, but they put that sound in to make it sound like he was like warming his gun up, like you got to turn it on.
I thought he was maybe turning it from stun to kill,
right, or something weird like that, right? Yeah, it was a strange choice to see such a cool, bold action and then hear this, and we even had the subtitles on, and it said something like "gun warming up" or something, which I thought was kind of silly. The snap was plenty. Unsnapping his gun was plenty, so that was a little bit strange. Watching this episode was a little bit strange because they just do a Kirk thing. Pike meets a woman that he's met in the past for like 10 minutes. They had no relationship, but they met for 10 minutes. We only know this from the scene that was deleted. You can see the deleted scenes if you pick up that.
4K.
Yeah, it's totally cool. But he only knew her for 10 minutes, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Seriously.
And then she comes on the ship and they're together. And my first thought is Pike has a girlfriend. And I do understand that we're in the future and it's probably much more open or whatever, you know what I mean? And honestly, this show is set up to be like the original series. So he's basically Kirk. They're going to do the things that Kirk used to do, because there's a certain group of people who want that in their Star Trek. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I do understand that it is a part of the original series.
Yeah.
So they're doing what Kirk did. But I was just thinking, what's up with his girlfriend? I mean, and it's a big deal from the very first episode and in later episodes all the way through season 2. You know, they get very serious. So I'm not... That felt a tiny bit odd to me. But I know why they did it. The last point that I want to make about this episode is there is, early on in these episodes, there's a lot of trying to make it one big story. Like the previously on. This episode doesn't need a previously on, but it has a previously on.
Yeah, a long one.
Yeah, and they go into... Uhura doesn't really want to stay on the ship. And the doctor has a daughter that he's trying to take care of. And it was a plot point, you know.
In the story.
Yeah, the kid does go and find the girl, and maybe he could save the girl because of this new medicine. You know, it's a plot point, but they were really trying hard early on, and I'm really glad they kind of got away from this, to try to make everything one big story. They even showed Pike... witnessing his death from the other show, and we do not need any of that. And I'm fine. I know in season 7, halfway through, he's going to save the kids, or whatever. It's cool. I get it. But we don't need that.
This is the Monster of the Week, Star Trek, right?
This is, yes. Discovery can do that stuff. I know it's Discovery's last season coming up, but we don't want it in Lower Decks. We don't want it in this. I mean, that's not why we watch Star Trek. And as long as we have this, other Star Trek shows can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not for this show. And I think they figured that out. Because they really, season 2 especially, I feel like every episode is just a whole different thing, which is great. So I felt like there was just too much old stuff drudging up in each episode, but they slowed down on that, so that's great. Overall, I really liked this episode. I wish that it could have been a little more of a surprise. I wish we didn't have so many hints that she was a bad guy from the beginning, so that we could genuinely take that trip with Pike and then go, oh my gosh, this is insane. And I still sort of felt that way. It's kind of insane what happens, but that could have gone a lot further if they weren't telegraphing so much from the get-go. But overall, I'd probably give this episode like an 8. There's not a lot of crazy science. They explain in the episode that the reason the child has to suffer is because the machine was built too long ago. We don't even know how it works. We've tried different things, and yet they're this culturally and scientifically very advanced civilization. They can't figure out how to either move or suspend their platforms in a more reasonable way,
That was really important to me, and I kept harping on it as we were watching the episode, that I absolutely need an explanation as to why they have to put this kid into the driver's seat of this platform city that they have. And they eventually did say it, and it works. What they said works. Right. That they don't know why they need the child's neurological brain waves to fly the thing, but they do. Mm-hmm. Which can kind of get us into this next part.
Just one other quick thing. I do want to point out that in the episode, they do state that there are children who suffer in the Federation, and the Federation ignores them. So they feel superior to the Federation because they do not ignore the suffering of one child. Their entire culture worships that child because they understand what that child has given up for them to be happy. So that's how the episode ends. And of course it ties to us. There are children that suffer in our world every day, which is terrible. All right. So the episode's good. It's a good one.
Yeah, so when we first heard about this episode, I was very much interested in it because we read that it might have been a ripoff of an Ursula K Le Guin story, which is called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, but that's how I'm pronouncing it. And this is a short story from her collection, From the Wind's 12 Quarters. Which I do have at my house, but I'm still here for the holidays at my brother's house, so I don't have it here to show, but we'll put up a cover of it. This story was very interesting and different than I expected. I expected it to be another example of this trope in sci-fi, of the one must suffer so that all can live a better life, and it was actually much more philosophical than that. The story is told in a second person, where she keeps speaking directly to the reader. You can imagine this. You could say that, and it reminded me more of Italo Calvino's writing in Invisible Cities, in the sense that it was just a look at the city. There's no characters or anything like that at all. It's just a look at a snapshot of this city. And the city is perfect and lovely, and she even says you can imagine it any way you want. It doesn't matter, because the main point of the story is that there is a kid in a room that is being basically tortured and neglected, and that everybody that lives in this wonderful, very happy city has to, when they're of a certain age, come and see this child and see what is being done to him. And that some, or her, she doesn't specify a gender. In fact, she does say him or her. Really, it's very strange how she writes this, because she'll let you imagine anything you want as long as you get the philosophical concept she's putting forward. And then she hints at the concept that the reason that these people are so nice to each other, and the reason that they raise their children so well, and the reason that there's so much happiness in this city, is because they all have to go look at this kid being tortured and neglected. And that somehow, knowing that's going on, and she talks about they go home and they weep and they cry and they hate themselves and they hate the city, and then eventually they just come to terms with it and treat everybody better because of that strange sadness they have from having to know that one person has to suffer for their city. So the Star Trek is a little bit different in the sense that they really did make it scientific. This story isn't about the science. Star Trek said the kid has to be there and the people don't want it there. Right? If they had their choice, they would all have found a different way for their city to float and exist. But they can't. They can't figure out how it was done, so they have to continue doing things the way that they are. And a lot of these stories about one person suffering or being sacrificed for a town, like The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, a lot of these stories are about tradition and how people don't want to give up tradition. And I don't feel that this Star Trek episode falls into that category. But this Ursula K Le Guin story kind of does, in the sense that they just keep torturing the kid. There's no reason, except for it probably makes them better people to go see this kid suffering, and then in that way realize that their life is way more enjoyable than that kid's, so they make the best of it. So she talks about the way that people react to this, and then she brings up a third possibility. So people either go home and cry and hate it, or they think about it for years, but eventually come to accept it. Some just try to forget it. And then she talks about the people that see this child being tortured and decide that they absolutely cannot handle it, so they leave the city. And that's why it's titled The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, is because there are people that choose to walk away, and those are the people that she talks about at the very end. The people that see this awful situation and say, nope, without knowing what is out there, they walk in. And she hints that there's an even better city that they go to. And then she says maybe it doesn't even exist, maybe it does, but the ones who walk away, by her estimation, are the ones that are the most morally are the most moral of the bunch. And that to me is the one part that I feel like the writers of this Star Trek episode absolutely were inspired by this story for, in the sense that it ends with Pike choosing to walk away. Mm-hmm. Because they worked really hard to make a connection between Pike and Alora that like we've never heard of, because they needed to make the statement that he wanted to maybe consider this a place he would live in the future. so that his decision to walk away at the end was much stronger. So in that case, I do believe it was inspired by this story. But to say it was a ripoff, I think, is a little bit strong, only because we also found, and we can't find this exact script, but we did find that in 65, Gene Roddenberry had an idea similar to this episode, and they have been, of course, mining old scripts for this. And this story didn't come out until, I believe, 1971. So the idea was there beforehand. So I think that while there is some inspiration from this story, I don't think they just ripped off the entire story.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. Because you can't just pretend that this doesn't exist.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are so many stories about one person taking on the burden of a society so the society can be happy from further back. And
yeah, The Giver is one of the most, I think that people read it in high school. The Giver is one of the most important science fiction books out there, and has this exact same plot. One person that takes on a burden so that everybody else can live a better life. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was good. I enjoyed it.
Dark episode.
Yeah, it was a very dark episode. I do feel a tiny bit weird about the idea, like we were talking about how, like Apple, for instance, having their products built in China, which means it's possible that they're using child labor to build Apple products.
Nike.
Right. Yeah. And it kind of makes you wonder if we idolized those children, if we worshipped those children for suffering for us, would that justify it?
Yeah, would that make us better people to say, instead of looking away and ignoring and forgetting it, we're going to... And of course the answer is that may be one step, but it doesn't justify it. You have to take another step, which in the story, Ursula K Le Guin says is to walk away. Yeah. But yet another step that isn't talked about in either of them is to fight back, of course. But they didn't get into that in any of this media. So, yeah, it's dark, but it was a very enjoyable episode and very interesting story by Ursula K Le Guin.
Yeah. All right, I believe that's it. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like button. And if you like these kinds of videos, subscribe. We got a ton of this. And thanks so much for watching.